reading tonight at Books and Books. It's really a very special night for all of us here at the bookstore. Many of you know that we do lots of different events throughout the years. This is our 32nd year of being in business. It's hard to believe. Thank you. And we've tried over all that time to stay the same, yet have some changes to make what we do even stronger and better. And one of those changes you're witnessing tonight, because with us in the room right now are a group of wonderful guys who've been helping us do live streaming of many of our events. So tonight's event will be live streamed. So those of you out there, hello. We know that there are people who've been watching from literally all over the world. So that's been sort of cool for this. But because of that, I just wanted to remind you that during the Q&A, I'll ask you to stand and I'll give you a mic and all of that sort of thing. But I also want you to know that if you go to our website, which is booksandbooks.com, you can purchase a signed copy of Howard's book tonight if you're watching it out there in the internet. And if you call before 9 o'clock, before Howard leaves, he might even be able to personalize it for you. So that could be an interesting thing. But the other reason why it's special is because one of the first events that was a kind of a signatory event of Books and Books back in 1982 when we opened were our last Friday of every month's open poetry reading. And many of you will note that this is the last Friday of the month. So it's very, very appropriate to be hosting Howard tonight, because Howard was one of our first poets to be reading in one of our very first open poetry readings so many years ago. Howard is a very unusual poet in the sense that this book that we're celebrating tonight, Poems from the Mudroom, is his collected works. But we know there'll be another edition of this because he's not going to stop after this. Howard has written 17 poetry books. That's 17. He's written over 2,000 poems. And he's also written an autobiography. He was nominated to be the Poet Laureate of Florida in 1980. And he's received lots and lots of different awards for his work, including the Fine Arts Press Poetry Award, the first annual MyPo Literary Award, and he was selected to represent the U.S. in the Poet 2000 Sculpted Library, which is an international exhibition of the works of contemporary poets, which after touring is now on permanent display in Ireland. Also in 2007, the New Times nominated him or called him in the Best of Miami edition, the best poet in Miami. And I think you'll all agree with me that Howard is. And I hope you'll please join me in giving a warm welcome to Howard Camner. Thanks, Howard. And before we get started, I just wanted to ask Howard, do you remember those early days?
No, I don't remember yesterday, but yes, I do, of course, yes. The early days were amazing because we talked before how we had to move everything around and do all these crazy things to get the readings going, and this place was a desert. Miami was a cultural desert. There was nothing, and this man turned Miami into an amazing place because he did it alone by himself. He created this thing, and it's phenomenal, and it's the only reason I stay here now because of him. That's it. That's it.
Well, thank you, Howard. But you know, Howard, there's also something, and you know, what's interesting for me is that we opened in 1982, but of course you had a full life prior to 1982.
No, I did not.
I've read about it. And talk a little bit about your life in New York prior to writing all your poetry.
Okay, well, where is Miguel Padura? Right there, the famous artist Miguel Padura. He was there with me in New York, and we got very involved at this place called the West End the West End Cafe across from Columbia University, right? And it was a jazz club, and it was also the headquarters of the Beat Poets in New York. And Ginsberg was there and all these people. And Miguel used to back me up on some poems, and then he left before I did. He got smart and he left New York before I did. And then I started getting members of Duke Ellington's orchestra who would play there sometimes to back me up. They were a substitute for Miguel, so. So it was more of a performance thing at that point, and I wore a white face and the whole thing, and I never forget walking down Broadway one night after a reading, and I had my long hair and this hat and a brown leather coat and the white face on, clown makeup, and this car pulls up, and these undercover cops grab me and throw me against the car, and they say, "You look like a guy who's been robbing houses." I said, "There's a guy robbing houses who looks like this?" And anyway, so New York was quite an adventure, yeah. So.
An early example of stop and frisk, huh?
That's right. That's right.
Well, I'm going to let you go on with the reading, but I want to thank you for some of those early memories as well, and thank you for the kind words, too.
I want to tell you, first, I want to tell a story before you leave, Mitchell. Wait. Do you know how Books and Books got its name? Anybody? No. About 33 years ago, Mitchell and I were sitting around drinking. And he said, "Books and pencils?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Books and macaroni salad?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Books and Knish?" And I said, I went on and on and on. And after 3 days of this, he said, "Books and books?" And I said, "Yeah." So that's how Books and Books got its name. So now you know the truth. Okay. Speaking of truth, let me do a few things. I'm not very good at love poems. It's not my thing. But I try sometimes to write love poems, and this is one I wrote a while back. This is called "Broad on the Beach." She's a trap. I can sense it. She doesn't move except to turn the pages of a romance. I circle her and imagine, but that's as far as I'll go because she's dangerous. I can feel it. Her glance is casual. Her beauty is overwhelming. And just as I'm about to give in, her dark glasses slip down the bridge of her nose, and she pushes them back up with her tongue. It was not a pretty sight, I'll tell you. It was kind of exciting, but it was not a pretty sight. This is called Normal Street. Normal Street. Mr. Black mows his lawn. Mrs. Green does her laundry. Miss Brown tends her garden. Mrs. White does her dishes, and Mr. Gray washes his car. And when day is done on Normal Street, they all gather down at the local donut shop and screw the donuts. I think it's sick. I can understand the chocolate-covered glaze, that I can understand, but not the jelly-filled. Or that's right. Okay. All right. So speaking of donuts, you're driving down the turnpike and you see these signs that say 58 minutes to Yeehaw Junction. 42 minutes to Yeehaw Junction. I always thought, there's some suit in Tallahassee deciding how long it's going to take me to get to Yeehaw Junction. And I never understood that. But that's the kind of thing that it gives to me on a silver platter ideas. And my muse, during Aaron's, my muse says, "Hey, asshole, write something." So this is 36 minutes to Yeehaw Junction. You can almost taste the stupidity. You can feel it slapping your face like a drunken drag queen. You can swerve to the right or veer to the left. You can plug up your tailpipes or cover your crotch, but it's useless. Only 36 minutes to Yeehaw Junction. And you can feel your palms sweat. You can turn off the power and move to higher ground, but it's senseless because the clay roads have been paved. The earth keeps us apart, and the moon doesn't know what to do. So watch for holes. Look both ways before you cross yourself, and don't argue. With your back against the wall, your feet flat on stone, you inch your way up slowly, carefully. Smack it on the snout if it gets too close. Cast that shadow, flip that coin, draw an imaginary line and break the sound barrier. 36 minutes to Yeehaw Junction, and you remember the clouds move east to west. You remember to kick your feet like you're swimming. You remember that you forgot to feed the kitty. You forgot to take the trash out. You forgot that piranhas sleep at night where there's no sign of life, no snow caves to hide in, no bridges to burn. Not yet anyway. You can see it down around the corner like a bad omen. So wear your waders and aim for the gills. Pick your landing spot and find the anterior sucker. Brace for impact and make a donation. You know to go for the left front corner. You need to see through your feet and watch for tripwire. You know to bend that rule of thumb till they scream 36 minutes to Yeehaw Junction. And you realize you left the stove on. You realize you're overdrawn. You realize that time is running out and you can hear it like a wounded wolf reaching for God. You can smell it like that stray that just crawled into your corner to die. And if you're attacked, you know to keep movement to a minimum. Head for water. Pull that bandana down. Hold your breath. Swim sideways. Move toward the punch. Duck and roll. Avoid live wires. And don't forget to open your chute. 36 minutes to Yeehaw Junction, and it looks like the last lifeboat left. And you realize that her stinger pumps poison for 2 days straight. You realize that you need to stay vertical, and you understand that, man, you should have turned around years ago. Speaking of Yeehaw Junction, this is a true story, and this happened before I was married. Okay, true story. Happened on the corner of Cahuenga and Yucca Street in Hollywood, California, in about 1987, something like that. This is called Paper Doll. As our tongues found each other, my fingers traced down her spine, and I realized to my horror that she had been stapled together. That scared the crap out of me. That was really, I went home and just lost it. It was really something. Okay, speaking of which, okay, if I have a signature poem, this is it. Zoot Suit. Some of you may have heard it before. If you have, you'll hear it again. This is Zoot Suit. To my recollection, we never played catch. He never took me camping. He never took me fishing. He never taught me how to play chess, Hell, we never even went to the zoo. But we did go to a lot of freak shows together, freak shows. Me in my baseball cap and him in that lime green zoot suit. That lime green zoot suit. He loved that zoot suit. We went to freak shows all the time. We'd gawk at the pinheads. We'd glance at the hideously deformed snake man. We'd cringe as the geek bit off the head of a live chicken for a bottle of booze. We'd watch in amazement as the limbless hot dog man would roll a cigarette with his mouth and light it with his tongue. We'd gasp at the man with the bottom half of his writhing twins sticking out of his chest. We'd stare at the repulsive dog-faced girl, the monstrous pig boy, horror upon horror. But it was meant to teach me a lesson. When we would leave the freak shows, my father would put his arm around me and say, "Son, as you go through life and you think you have problems, just remember these poor bastards and their problems." And I thought to myself, yeah, they got problems, real problems, but at least they don't have to be seen in public with a guy in a lime green zoot suit. That is an absolutely true story, except the zoot suit was like a red plaid thing. It wasn't lime green, so I stretched that a little bit. There's a lot of tough guys in Miami. You see them all over the place. Tough guys. So I would like to dedicate this to all the tough guys out there. He's as tough as a burnt bull steak and wears black leather to prove it. He roughs himself up nightly just to feel the pain. You never know what he's going to do next. He's unpredictable. He's a walking time bomb. He does scary things just for the fun of it. And he calls himself Trouble because that's what he is. He never says much, and he thinks even less. He makes sure everyone respects him whether they do or not. He's meaner than the streets he roams and the dogs he bites. No one pushes him around. Nothing frightens him. He's one of a kind. And he is the only person in the history of the human species to get honeymoon cystitis for masturbation. I never understood that poem. But I don't understand anything I write, so that's nothing new. Okay. Some of you know the story. I got an email from a guy in Spain, and he thought I was dead, which he was sort of right. But he found me on a list of very famous dead poets. There was, Cummings and all these, Auden and all these people and me. And what he did was he took some of our poems, which he figured was in public domain, and he recorded them with an orchestra, and he put it out on a CD in Spain. And the CD is called Insomnia. So when I found out about it, I stayed up nights worrying about this because this guy owed me money. What is this? So I contacted him and explained to him, back and forth. I said, well, I'm sort of alive and this thing's out on a CD and hello, So he was very nice. He sent me Eurobucks, which is like Monopoly money to me. I don't know what it is, So anyway, he used two of my poems, and this is one of them. doesn't make sense because it's not a song. It doesn't fit with the music at all. And the guy did it phonetically, and it's really bizarre. So anyway, this is called Granny and the Wolf. Alone in the woods, left over from a fairy tale, Granny prepares meals for a wolf. But he will not eat her cooking. It's nothing personal. It's just that she doesn't understand his nature. She doesn't understand his needs. And as Granny slaves over a hot stove, the wolf wanders around outside, catches her scent, tracks her down, pounces on her, and eats her alive. That is his nature. Those are his needs. It's nothing personal. I don't think we appreciate our farmers too much. We don't think about it. You go to the store, there's fruits and vegetables and all this stuff, and you don't really, in general, you don't really think about the farmers. So I wanted to write a poem to honor them. And as you can tell, I focus on things in my poem. So this is on a piece of farm equipment that they use called a backhoe. So this is called Backhoe in honor of the farmer's backhoe. She never faces me. It took 6 weeks to write that poem. I wrote this long thing, and I said, screw it. She never faces me. This is called Stick Man. I am a stick man. You could look at me forever and never see me for who I am. I move through landscapes unnoticed, wanting everything I see. To you, I am the sum of a few lines, drawn and tattered and nothing more, but I bleed and cry and love as much as anyone. I am a stick man, but don't think less of me. That would be ignorance, and ignorance is a mistake. I can fit into scenes where you can't. I can blend into architecture and never lose my way. I can form opinions and doorways just by switching positions. In one move, I could change my image and give myself some hope. Okay. This one kind of ties in with Zoot Suit. This is another thing I used to do with my father. That we did carnival things, we didn't, which explains a lot, I know. This is called The Amazing Shem Guard's Traveling Fleece Circus, circa 1962. Anybody remember the Fleece circuses? Do they even have them anymore? I don't know. Anybody remember them? Do they? Yeah? Okay. I stood on my toes and peered into the miniature big top, and there they were, fleas. Fleas walking the tightrope with no net below, fleas jumping through hoops, fleas shot out of cannons, fleas on the flying trapeze, Chinese acrobat fleas, 10 flea clowns in a tiny flea car, sword-swallowing fleas, fleas that juggled fire-eating fleas, incredible, amazing fleas. And as others walked out in disgust, having not seen a thing, the amazing Shem Guard, ringmaster and proprietor of the flea circus, tried to make a believer out of me. He said, if you look real hard, you can see them, kid. I do see them, I said. They're amazing. Shem just laughed. He said, "There's nothing to see, kid. It's all mechanical." Then he showed me the hidden buttons he presses to make everything work. He put a tiny bicycle on a tightrope and he pressed a button and it pedaled back and forth. "You see, kid," he said, "it's all just an illusion." "No, Mr. Shem," I said, "no. The fleas are there. You're an illusion." Okay, I'm gonna close with this one. This is the other one that the guy in Spain stole from me. Yeah. I did Granny and the Wolf. This one is called Mad Mildred, a Liberated Woman. And last time I did this in public, I was invited to go to a halfway house. It was kind of like a prison for like women and things that just I was scared to death. Let's put it that way. So when I introduced this poem, I said, "How many of you are liberated out there?" And they all went, and I said, "I'm going to die." That was not a good introduction. So anyway, this is Mad Mildred, a Liberated Woman. She rocks back and forth in her rocking chair, humming an old lullaby and knitting mittens for the children down the street. Across the room, sitting at the dinner table, is the skeleton of her husband, Frank, and the bones of their dog at his feet. Frank's skeleton has a pipe in his mouth and is reading a 40-year-old newspaper. The dog's just dead. Mildred hated them both. One day she went insane and just stopped feeding them. Thank you.
Big round of applause. Now, we do have time for some questions. I know that Barbara's got a question right over there. So, Barbara, will you stand so you can ask your question?
Howard, where do you get your inspiration?
Yes. And repeat the question.
Barbara asked, "Where do I get my inspiration?" From this microphone. It comes to me in flashes, and in fact, but on the back of the book, there's a blurb by the Comstock Writers Group, whatever they are, that says that my characters are certainly the product of a vivid imagination. I wish that was true. I meet a lot of bizarre people, I just, especially, when in New York and places like that, you meet all kind of things, all kind of crazy characters. So I would say a lot from real life, yeah. Like Zoot Suit and the Fleece Circus and that stuff, that's all real. That's all true from when I was a kid, so yeah. Thank you for your question, Barbara.
Okay. Yes, you do. This is being broadcast live through the internet.
While your poems may seem to be free association, they seem more like stream of consciousness. Yet the ideas are so disparate and from all over the place. How do you keep track of it, and how does that happen? Does one word lead into like 50 other words? because it's an interesting trip. A poem with you is like going on a crazy trip. I love it.
Yeah, Mitchell wants me to repeat the question, and I'll be damned if I'm going to repeat that question. So, Pancho, you want to do this because I can't. The question was, what was the question? The question was the stream of consciousness and how does it all kind of formulate, that kind of thing. I don't know. I don't know the answer. It all kind of comes to me in flashes, like usually very quick things, and I'll write them down, or I'll usually when I'm driving. So I have caused thousands of wrecks because I need to write something down, and these people on the street are inconveniencing me because they're on the street, and I have work to do, and I'm searching for pencils and pens and things. So it's flashes. Sometimes I put them together like puzzles, and or if they're like little stories, like the Fleece Circus thing. I just take it from real life and I zing it a little bit and that kind of thing. I'm sure I did not answer your question. So maybe a little bit. I don't know. So.
What can you tell us about Al Jolson?
Al Jolson, thank you very much. The legendary Jonathan Rose, ladies and gentlemen. My Al Jolson was my father's god. And growing up in our house, there was Al Jolson, and then God. It went like that. And so I was raised on Al Jolson, and so was my sister sitting over here. She was raised by Al Jolson too, and at a very young age we were forced to do minstrel shows. It was very, very traumatic. It was between the carnivals and the minstrel shows. It was a nightmare. It was really something. I don't have the answer, but go. Okay.
A poet myself,
Okay.
and I wanted to find out where you were from originally, and a little bit about your literature background, about your where did you find your calling and your interest in writing and in poetry, and how did that develop?
Okay, that's a good question, and the question was, Pancho, because I don't know. The question was, how I got started, that kind of thing, and where am I from? What got me interested in writing poetry? Okay, it's a good question and a fair question. Okay, I'm from a distant land called Miami, Florida. I'm ashamed of it, but like I said, the only reason I'm here is because of Mitchell and books. It's the only reason I stay. And what got me started honestly, as far as a background, I don't have a background. I'm not one of those people who went to school and studied literature and all this stuff. Because personally, I don't really see how that helps anything in real. I mean, to some people it does. But to me, I don't get that. So some people, I have. I don't know. It never worked for me. I never got it. So how I got into it is I actually started as a songwriter, as a lyricist, and actually the cause of it is Miguel Padura, the famous artist over here, because when we were at the West End in New York, we would write songs together, and I wrote with Joe and Pancho and Seth, and we would all write songs together. And when we were like 16, 17 years old, that kind of thing. And we're only in our late 20s now, so it hadn't been that long. And we were hanging out at the West End, and I was doing mainly rhyming poems. That was my thing. Rhyming poetry was really, really easy for me because my head works in rhymes. There was no, for me to write anything other than a rhyme was a real war. It was a real effort because everything was so easy to me. And we were at the West End, we were supposed to do a show. It was advertised in the Village Voice and the whole thing. And he would back me on guitar, and he was in Connecticut and didn't show up. So I was kind of stuck there and kind of had to do it. Just instead of just reading my lyrics and stuff like that, it sort of turned into poetry. So I thought, I don't need this guy. You know? And it went on from there, so it kind of developed that way. I don't know if did I answer anything? Okay, thank you. But what started me on, seriously, I needed, my grandfather, my maternal grandfather had died. I was 17, and I needed an outlet. And it was either become a serial killer, and which I can't stand blood, so that was not going to work. So I started writing, and I just, it was easy, and that's how I needed the outlet, and it's just been a great release. Anything? So, anybody else? Anything?
Why don't we end the reading with a poem? Could you give us another poem?
Oh, okay. It's okay. One more. Here we go. And this is to. There are some wonderful doctors here who I love dearly, but this is to one of my top-notch favorite doctors. Dick, Jane, and Spot were doing just fine when a cat swaggered in and messed up their minds. He tipped his hat and let trouble brew, and the world changed forever, which we owe to you. Theodore Giesel, oh say, can you say why the king is on stilts and tomorrow's today? When that cat tips his hat and the room starts to sway. With a bump and a thump, things fall where they may. So we sit down for breakfast with a good lad called Sam, and the waiter arrives with green eggs and ham. Some send it back because they can't understand the meaning behind that green eggs and ham. We go hopping on pop as the Grinch creeps on by. He takes what he can, and we all know why. You taught us to count with one fist in blue. I recall one was red and the other was blue. When old Mr. Brown knew how to moo. There were apples on apples and a fox wearing socks. 7 Lady Godivas made their way around the blocks. There are wockets in our pockets. I don't lie, and that's true. We're happy. Won't deny it was good to see you. You pointed out places that maybe we'll go, and warned about dangers that we need to know. And then there was Horton, who heard him a who, which wouldn't have happened if it weren't for you. And what would I do if I ran the zoo? There was Gertrude Mcfuzz, whose tail grew so far. She learned, as did we, you should be who you are. We got us to think ways we never did thunk, like a town full of people on an elephant's trunk. There was Yertle the turtle, who was toppled as king by plain little Mac, who was seen as nothing, not like Thidwick the moose with his heart on a string. Some walked around on their crazy duck feet, and I saw it go down on Mulberry Street. I tried 500 hats of Bartholomew Cubbins as the butter battle raged because of rude wrong way rubbins. The bibelow seed was planted, and then Daisy-head Maisie started to grin. I had trouble in getting to Salisaloo, but you pointed the way, as you always do. There were star-bellied sneetches and plain belly too. The crime and discrimination, we learned that from you. And your north-going Zacks and your south-going too, both refusing to budge, both refusing to move. Then we all took a dip in McElligott's pool. Now Horton, he sat on that egg dawn to dusk, because sometimes in life you do what you must. We do what we must when we're us head to toe, like Marvin K. Mooney, who just wouldn't go. The Daryl McBoing Boing, the Lorax, and others, you showed us all that we're all sisters and brothers who look out our window on a cold, cold, wet day, unaware that that bump is a cat come to play. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Thanks so much for bringing the spirit of those days back to Books and Books. We really thank you. And we thank you all for coming. We thank all of you out there for watching. We have Howard's books up at the front, and you're more than welcome to buy one. In fact, you better buy one. And Howard will be right here to sign. So again, thank you all for coming.